of Venom, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and on my planet, I'm kind of a loser. This is Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at superhero movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It is sometimes a challenge to do that, but it's always a good time. And this week we are talking Venom. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the man who eats his comic books frozen right out of the bag, Andrew Williams. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
I am ready for Venom, man.
Yes. A relatively recent movie compared to most of the ones that we talk about. Is this the most recent movie we've covered now? 2018?
I think so. I think
Apocalypse was 2016?
16, I think. So yeah, this is, I think, our definitely our most recent film. Probably won't ultimately be our most recent film by the end of the time that we're done here. But yeah, a scant 3 years old.
3 years ago, but a completely different world 3 years ago. Man, did you see this movie in theaters, Andrew, in the before times?
I definitely did, because it was a comic book movie and I wasn't doing anything. So I know I checked it out.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in theaters. I went in, to be completely honest with you, with rock bottom expectations. For one, just kind of the concept of a Venom movie without Spider-Man, I just wasn't really sold on. And I don't think the trailers for this movie are very good. I don't think they were accurate in telling you what the movie, what to expect. And I had rock bottom expectations. I came out kind of pleasantly surprised. I'm not saying this, we're going to get to all the good stuff about the movie. That's what this show is all about. But even back then, 2018, seeing this in theaters, I walked out and I was like, that was a good time. I expected something much worse than what I got. And I realize that's not a glowing review, but it exceeded my low expectation. How did you feel before going into the movie? Were you hyped for it, or kind of like you said, you're just, it's a super movie, I'll go see it?
I definitely had the same kind of hesitations. The idea of a Venom movie without Spider-Man was something that was, it gave me pause. I was definitely curious how Sony was going to handle that. So I would say I was kind of the opposite of hyped. Like, Sony's track record at that point wasn't particularly glowing. Ruben, the director, had kind of had a couple of less than stellar outings prior to this. So I actually was kind of like, I'm going to see this because I'm not going to be the guy that like writes it off and never sees it. But at the same time, I kind of went in with just like I said, very low expectations. Like, I wasn't expecting a lot out of it because it was just, Sony was making some choices.
Well, specifically, the movie was released October 5th, 2018. Kind of a weird time to release a superhero movie. Usually August, we're wrapping up the summer blockbusters, which is where you see all the superhero movies. In November, you might get like a prestige release, like a big, fancy superhero movie. But October, it's usually like horror movies. It's almost sometimes early October, like a dumping ground for movies that studios don't have a lot of expectations for. But they dropped this movie with a budget of just over $100 million. So not a low budget movie by any means. And Andrew, this movie made $856 million at the box office. I knew this movie was popular. I knew it was a hit, but good Lordy, that's a lot of money.
That's bank. That
is higher than any of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man 1 is the only one that clears $800 million. And I know there's inflation. If you adjusted them, it'd probably be more. But still, just for perspective, that is a massive hit.
I think to that point, that might have been more than any of the DCEU movies made at the time. Like, more than like when this happened. There's been stuff now, but like to that point, it had grossed more than Man of Steel, BVS, and Justice League, like on their own the first times. That's a Venom movie. That's nuts. That's how much money incredible. This movie made.
For a much smaller budget than any of those movies you listed, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Critically, however, not very well received. Just a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. However, the audience score is a little bit higher, which is to be expected. Usually, with these types of movies. Audiences are a little bit more lenient. Usually that people that like the movie are the ones that go on and review it. But the audience score for this movie is 81%. That is a huge gap between critics and audiences. And it almost kind of gave me pause for us covering this movie because a lot of people like this movie. It's pretty popular. A lot of the movies we talk about have a bad reputation on the internet specifically, just kind of in pop culture, people talking. But Venom, for the most part, it's not hard to find someone that enjoys this movie. It's a bit of a flip of something like Ang Lee's Hulk or Spider-Man 3. Both of those movies are certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, but we covered them because it's much harder to find defenders of that movie. So not to out you too much, Andrew, but with this movie being so recent, unlike something like, say, The Phantom, we've had conversations about this movie before. We've talked about it before. We had a podcast. I know you weren't hot on it, back in 2018. You're much more positive these days, as we're going to find out on the podcast. But without getting into it too much, not your favorite movie in 2018?
No. I kind of came out and I wouldn't say I really disliked it, but it was just kind of gone. Like I came in, I watched it, and then like it was kind of like gone from my brain within like hours. Like my brother, like I remember talking to my brother about it not too long afterwards, and I was like, "Wait, what?" Like there were parts of the movie that just weren't sticking, and so it felt more like. So yeah, I could say I wasn't a fan, but it was a lot more that just like it didn't leave an impact. Like it just really didn't hit for me, and that kind of seemed to be more of the common criticism that I heard amongst others was that it just really wasn't memorable in a lot of ways. But apparently that's a minority opinion based off these audience scores we're seeing.
Several people come together to write this movie, such as Jeff Pinkner, who we've talked about before because he was a co-writer on The Amazing Spider-Man 2, aka the best live-action Spider-Man movie ever made. He was also a co-writer on both of the more recent Jumanji movies. How you feel about those movies, Andrew? Do you like those?
Yeah, I actually have a good time with those. Those are perfectly fun family fare.
I've seen Welcome to the Jungle. I saw that one in theaters. I really enjoyed it. I haven't seen the sequel yet. I own it. It's in my Voodoo library, so I'll get around to it. But I agree. It was a good time.
Yep. And on both of those Jumanji movies, as well as this movie, he shares screenwriting credit with Scott Rosenberg.
Yes. Now, Scott Rosenberg, he wrote this little action movie in the 90s called Con Air, starring everyone's favorite Nicolas Cage. Andrew, you a Con Air fan?
Oh yeah.
How could you not be, right?
How could you not love Con Air?
It's similar to my love for Face Off. I'm not gonna say like it's an ironic love. I enjoy both movies thoroughly. They're very entertaining, but they could have only been made in the 90s. Something about that flavor of action is just very 90s. I would put Face Off above Con Air. Where do you rank Nicolas Cage? Yeah,
Face Off is way up there because that's Nicolas Cage at like his right before the decline, basically. It's Nicolas Cage at like the peak of his powers with John Woo directing, and like how in God's name could that go wrong? And it doesn't. It succeeds in spades.
John Travolta before his much more massive decline, I would argue, kind of the tail end of his 90s resurgence.
Right. He has this 90s resurgence that just gone. But Face Off is fantastic. We could do a whole episode just talking about Face Off.
Do you think Quentin Tarantino's voicemail is like full of John Travolta messages these days? Like, hey, you got another part for me? Can I be in another one?
How about the Vega brothers? We're not too old, right?
De-age me like Marvel. You can do it.
We can do it.
This movie is also co-written by Kelly Marcel. Now, I was not too familiar with her work filmography. I was looking through it, and I saw Saving Mr. Banks. And I was like, oh, that crappy Kevin Costner movie. And I clicked on it, and it's a Walt Disney movie, or it's about Walt Disney while he's making Mary Poppins with Tom Hanks. I'm not familiar with that movie. I think I was thinking of, it's called Mr. Brooks. Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
I think Dane Cook.
Dane Cook's in that, yeah.
Yeah, I just remember it has a really lame twist in that movie. But no, sorry, Kelly, you're not responsible for that movie. You're responsible for Saving Mr. Banks, which I hear is good, and 50 Shades of Grey, which No jokes. It has its audience.
Yeah, Saving Mr. Banks is about the creator of Mary Poppins' trepidation about the adaptation Disney was making at the time. So it's actually a very interesting story about a very early instance of a creator having trepidation about their work being adapted by somebody who might not necessarily have the same goals in mind as they did when they created it. So a very interesting movie. I recommend it. Emma Thompson, Tom Hanks, can't go wrong.
Who's the Mark Strong Award winner in there, Andrew?
It's probably Tom Hanks as Walt Disney.
It's so convenient that Walt Disney looks a lot like Sully and looks a lot like Captain Phillips and looks a lot like Mr. Rogers. Like all these real life people.
All these people
similar.
look all exactly
so conveniently
the same.
Tom Hanks can play them all.
Yeah, just
works
out really well. And then obviously she writes 50 Shades of Grey, which huge success based off a book series of the same name. And then also has a story credit on Cruella, the recent Cruella de Vil movie. So
I haven't seen that yet.
There.
I've heard it's pretty good.
I've had shocking people tell me I need to go see Cruella. Like my boss told me to go see Cruella. Like of the things I expected, not even on the card.
Most people are probably feeling the fatigue of the Disney remakes, the live action remakes, the villain spinoffs. This is like all of those things people are tired of, tied into one. But yeah, I've heard good things. Have not checked it out yet. Emma Stone may be a Mark Strong Award winner, from what I understand. But we will jump into it. Oh, no, we won't. We're not covering that. What am I saying?
No.
Now, this movie is directed by Ruben Fleischer. Most notably before this, probably for his directorial debut, Zombieland, which is a good time. I enjoy that movie enough. What about you, Andrew?
Good time. Relative hit based off of its lower budget. Yeah, I remember it made a bunch of waves when it first came out. People were pretty amped about it.
Not to jump too far ahead in our Venom conversation, but this movie, hashtag positivity podcast. We're going to talk about the high points, but I'm going to admit here, there's a bit of a tone issue with this movie, kind of bouncing all over the place, but I don't have that issue with Zombieland, which is interesting. I think that movie hit a very specific horror comedy note that I enjoyed, and it kept it the entire time. He also directed Gangster Squad, which has a all-star cast. I missed that one, though. I have not seen that. Have you seen Gangster Squad, Andrew?
I have. Hashtag positivity podcast prevents you saying anything further. No, but no, he directs Gangster Squad, which was like pretty hyped when it was coming out. I remember like all-star cast, the premise, the style, everybody was way into it. Came out and people were less than impressed. Similar to his other film, 30 Minutes or Less, it seemed like a very similar vibe of like just underwhelming final result. And then there's a 5-year gap between Gangster Squad and Venom, where it looks like he does some television stuff, kind of moves away from the films for a while, and then comes back for Venom. And to his credit, gets a huge hit with it.
Well, let's jump into the story of this movie. Eddie Brock is a streetwise journalist working to uncover the dark secrets of the Life Foundation. His methods lead him to being fired and being left by his fiancée. Brock decides to continue his investigation anyway, and soon comes into contact with a symbiotic alien life form that calls itself Venom and can take control of Brock's body at will. Now Brock has no choice but to help Venom stop an all-out alien invasion, and Venom helps Brock reunite with his fiancée. This movie's secretly a rom-com.
It is. Should have released it in February, guys.
Let's talk about the cast in this movie. And of course, we're going to start with the best casting, the best performance. We like to highlight one person in each movie that we talk about that goes above and beyond the call of duty, raises the quality of the entire movie with their performance. And we give that person the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, who gets your Mark Strong Award today?
I'm giving the Mark Strong Award to Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock / Venom. He's in. Like, I mean, you can talk about the tone, you can talk about the story, but like, he's dedicated. He's into this. He's selling it. He's acting off himself basically when he's doing the Eddie Venom back and forth stuff. He's doing it.
Yeah, sometimes our Mark Strong Award winners, like the man himself, like Mark Strong, right?
Right.
Green Lantern is a pretty good movie without him, but he comes in as a supporting character with such a good performance that he makes the movie better. But there's other Mark Strong Award winners like this one here, where without Tom Hardy, the movie doesn't work. You get a different person in
Right.
that lead. It's kind of similar to what I said about Billy Zane and the Phantom. Like the movie has potential to really be a disaster, despite what you may think of the final product as is, but it's undoubtedly being elevated by Tom Hardy's performance. And yeah, it's in danger of just not working with someone not as talented in that lead role. It is okay. We're about to jump into the whole cast, right? Hashtag positivity podcast. But here's a quick hot take. Everybody in this movie is miscast. Every single part. But they are all they all overcome that miscast and still deliver a good performance.
Yes.
But it gives this movie has such a weird. This movie's weird in a lot of ways.
It's very weird. And like honestly, when the credits rolled, that was the first thing that came into my brain. I was like, that was a weird movie. Like I don't know if it's like Hulk weird or like Superman 3 weird, but it's a weird movie. But I think you're definitely correct. And I definitely think Tom Hardy's performance is why it's appealing to audiences. I think him like willpowering through this movie and just bringing it up around him and just, yeah, I think you're very correct that if it's anybody but Tom Hardy, maybe not anybody but Tom Hardy, but like Tom Hardy is the thing holding this movie together.
Yeah, and this is after his. I mean, he's a huge star when this movie comes out. This isn't like one of the movies that leads him to stardom. Like he's starred in some high profile movies before this. People recognize that he's an extremely talented actor. So I think everybody kind of took a step back. Like, really, this Sony spinoff superhero movie? That's how you choose to get into the superhero game? But he brings it, and I, in my credits here, I have him as Tom Hardy, as Eddie Brock, and Venom instead of / Venom, because
right,
those are two separate performances and technically two separate characters. And he does the voice for Venom. He has conversations with himself, and specifically the characterization and performance of that Venom voice is really what puts him over the top for me. One thing that I think works really well in this movie is Venom having his own unique character. I love the character of the symbiote Venom in this movie. He's funny and he's very like earnest and straightforward. Like he's not being sarcastic. He says exactly what he's thinking. He's right down the middle, and they're back and forth. The chemistry with each other, between Tom Hardy and Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy, yes,
is my favorite part of this movie. Them talking to each other and arguing with each other, and Venom just being kind of a lovable goofball is what this movie does most successfully, I would argue.
Right. And I think that dynamic is another part of why it succeeds. I think the story really is kind of take it or leave it at the end of the day. It's functional, but I think it's just that, call it chemistry, whatever you want to call it, of Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock and as Venom, creating something that, apart from everything else, is memorable on its own. That performance is memorable for a variety of reasons that I think just elevate the whole film.
I mentioned this is kind of after Tom Hardy's rise. Tom Hardy, it's, sometimes Hollywood just like picks a guy or gal and puts him in like every movie. Like early 2000s had like Jude Law making like 2 movies a year, or Colin Farrell had a time where he was working at like a breakneck pace. And Tom Hardy certainly went through a period where he was in everything. So this movie is after his appearance in Inception and Dark Knight Rises. Quick hot take. Those are both bottom 3 Christopher Nolan movies. However,
no lies detected.
Positivity podcast. He's also in Dunkirk, which is like a top 3 Christopher Nolan movie. So he gets a good one in there. And they're all good. I don't want to go too hard on them. They're all good movies, but something's got to be at the bottom.
And he's also obviously one of the leads in Mad Max Fury Road, which is the greatest film of all time. So
yeah, okay, that's fine. That's a good. I can agree with that. Greatest movie of all time.
But no, so either way, like obviously the years before this, just Inception, Dark Knight Rises, Mad Max Fury Road, but you've got like The Revenant, Dunkirk. Like this guy is known at this point. He's
The
not
Revenant specifically. I mean, obviously Leonardo DiCaprio gets all the credit for that movie because he finally wins his Oscar. And Yeah, he's good. He's fine. Oh, you got attacked by a bear and you're barely alive. Cool. Tom Hardy steals that movie. He
I was
is
gonna say, I was
so
about to say,
good
I'm
in that
like,
movie.
Leo got the Oscar, but maybe he shouldn't have. But
Yeah, dude. Tom Hardy is so good. That's probably what I would point to as his best performance. It's so good.
very good. But either way, let's say, not an unknown quantity at this point. Not a guy who's got his choice of stuff and chooses to do Venom.
Would you consider this a spiritual successor to the Tom Hardy with his face covered line of films?
I mean, he gets large chunks of the film where he gets to show his face, so I would say no,
No.
because he doesn't actually go full Venom until like an hour into this movie. So
There's just that one shot like at the end where like half his face is Venom, half his face is
yeah,
Tom Hardy. You're right. All right. I don't know. Okay, fair enough.
if he broke the combo.
Michelle Williams is in this movie with God, hashtag positivity podcast. The worst wig I've seen in a very long time. So distracting. But she plays Anne Wang.
Yep.
Wang. Let me make sure I enunciate that well. This is Tom Hardy's fiance at the beginning of the movie, but then they separate and maybe get back together in the end. Kind of leaves it open. Michelle Williams, a fantastic actress. Weird she's in Venom, just like Tom Hardy.
Well, it's very obviously, my formative years. I remember her from Dawson's Creek, one of the leads on that show, and then like she took like
What do you mean by that, Andrew? Your formative years.
it was on TV all the time.
Oh, okay. All right.
This is a family show, Chris. But no, so like, but when she kind of transitioned into films, it felt like it was a lot of smaller films, a lot of more like intimate productions. Definitely not like summer blockbuster
Like
films.
Shutter Island might be the closest she got, something like that.
Yeah, or maybe The Greatest Showman or something like that. But like stuff like My Week with Maryland and like Blue Valentine, those things are like they're smaller movies. They're not big explosion filled CGI extravaganzas. And so I remember when I heard she got cast, I definitely was a little not like I think she's incapable, but just it seemed like an against the grain type move, which might have been why she did it. But yeah, she's here as the eventual she Venom, which we get a glimpse of.
She Venom. Yeah, I was curious. I will get into the kind of the comic book counterparts. I'm not super familiar with Venom and the greater lore around him. Yeah, she gets a quick scene where she is wearing the symbiote, and I was doing the research and I looked up the character and saw her credited as She Venom, which guys, we got to do better naming these characters. I mean, She Hulk, She Venom. It reminds me of like back in high school, my our mascot was a panther, and so like anytime they talked about the girls' teams, it was the Lady Panthers, and it's just
Panthers is like gender neutral.
exactly just call them the Panthers. Call them the
that's so needlessly done. You call them the male Panthers? I bet you don't.
Let's get back on track a little bit here. Yeah, she does a lot of smaller roles. Man, have you seen Manchester by the Sea?
Yes.
Casey Affleck. If you want to watch some riveting performances, Casey Affleck, Michelle Williams, she's got a key scene in that movie that is just a huge gut punch. If you want to watch a movie and then spend the rest of the day sitting alone in a dark room, sobbing and feeling absolutely horrible, I recommend Manchester by the Sea. Great movie. I will
that you'll watch once.
You'll watch one time. Yeah, put that right up there with Requiem for a Dream, Hotel Rwanda. Watch them one time in your life. Riz Ahmed plays Carlton Drake and Riot, another symbiote. This is when I'm talking about miscast in this movie. This guy, I am not familiar with this guy's other work. This is pretty much the only thing I know him from. He does a great job. He's miscast.
You saw Nightcrawler.
Oh my gosh, that's him, right? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
His Jake Gyllenhaal's partner.
Yep.
Oh man, this guy's a really good actor. He who would have thought?
Who would have realized? No,
in my head, like those aren't the same person. That's incredible.
Right.
At any rate, what I'm getting at here is, I don't know if it's his youthful appearance, but it's hard, when you're casting like the head of an evil corporation that may also be like a cult. This isn't really the look or style you typically go for, but he overcomes that. He puts in a great performance, and by the end of the movie, I'm buying it.
Yeah, we get kind of almost not quite like an Eisenberg Zuckerberg type thing, but like it's far more in like that vein of like youthful personality more than I would think of like a Lex Luthor type person, which is kind of
Right.
what Carlton Drake is supposed to be.
This feels like they were casting like a tech billionaire. They
Yeah,
usually
like
make
an
those
Elon
guys,
Musk,
but that's
Mark
not what
Zuckerberg
the
type
Life
guy.
Corporation is. So it comes off kind of strange casting.
It is very weird, and like it just when he makes the turn, like yeah, it's an odd choice, but he's still coming. Like if this was like slightly tweaked, there was a chance this could have been a Mark Strong. He was
Sure.
really, really good in the performance he was giving. It's just very strange. But like you said, I think it definitely adds to like I think the way they're choosing to play the character just kind of went against the casting. But I mean, Riz Ahmed is great. Obviously, Nightcrawler, Rogue One, a more recent one called The Sound of Metal, which was very, very good, where he plays like a drummer that's losing his hearing. He's a great actor, and he's really bringing it here. It's just, again, like the way they're choosing to play the character is a little strange.
Jenny Slate plays Doris Girth. Not sure if they, that's what the credits tell me. I'm not sure if they gave us her last name in the movie, but she's the scientist that is a bit of a whistleblower. She's the one that goes to Eddie Brock and says, hey, my boss isn't such a good guy. They're doing some really bad experiments here. This is kind of the core of miscasting because she is most known, at least for me, as a comedic actress for sure. Notably on the TV show Parks and Rec. She plays John Ralphio's sister, and she's hilarious. She's fantastic. But
And
they're casting like a in the best way. But they're casting like a straightforward scientist, and she's young. She got comedic chops that she's not using. It's strange casting, but like I've been saying, she overcomes all that. She still puts in a good performance. She's all over the trailers, and she's heavily featured in like the first act of this movie, and then killed pretty unceremoniously.
Yeah, and you don't even see it. It's like you don't even witness it. It happens off screen. I actually kind of liked seeing her against the grain because, her at Parks and Rec, I'm just like, stop talking, please. Her voice is so grating to me on that show. But,
money, please.
Stop it. This is a safe space, Chris. But no, like so. But you're right. It's very much like it's a very like straightforward role. Like this could have been almost anyone. But she's still like dialing in, giving a good performance. Basically, she's originally kind of on Carlton's side, kind of with the work that they're doing. But then when he starts experimenting on the symbiotes, he starts basically sacrificing people to these experiments with the symbiotes. And that's when her morals kind of kick in, and she goes to Eddie and is like, everything you thought is correct, and I'll give you the evidence that you need. So, but yeah, a bit of a strange casting.
Reed Scott plays Dan Lewis. Again, I'm not sure if we ever hear that full name in the movie. He is Michelle Williams' character's new boyfriend, who Eddie Brock's ex-fiance is now dating. And Andrew, this is the fifth casting we're talking about, and I'm already talking about a character, a side
beyond
character's
ancillary characters.
This is a tight cast. This is pretty narrow scope in this movie. But
it really is.
The only note I have about this guy, he's in Veep, which I've seen a little bit of. Very funny show. That's one of those. It's hard to binge because you can't like have that on the background because there's like
you have to be paying attention.
50 jokes a minute. It reminds me of like peak Arrested Development. It's hilarious, but like you could watch it 5 times and still pick up on news.
Oh yeah, I still rewatch Arrested Development, and I'm like, oh. That joke's been staring
I rewatched
like
first 3 seasons. I don't.
What is there more?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I watch all 3 seasons of Arrested Development. Hashtag positivity podcast. All right, this guy. The only note I want to say about him is there's this quality of an actor. I said most people are miscast. This man is not, because the quality you want in an actor where they are playing your lead character's new love interest. There's no kids involved in this movie, but like the stepdad look, nails it. Like he looks polite and kind. You have no reason to not like him, but also a bit of a punchable face is such a specific quality. Like they do it in Ant-Man. Like forgive me, I don't know the actual name off the top of my head.
Bobby
but,
Cannavale.
oh, look at that. Yeah, perfect
Oh
casting.
yeah, perfect casting.
They do it in Logan Lucky, which Andrew, have you watched Logan Lucky yet?
Nope.
Really good movie. The guy that plays Roy in The Office plays that role in that
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
It's perfect. It's like, yeah, I've got no real reason not to like you, but I kind of want to punch you in the face. Reed Scott, good quality to have.
Good quality. Yeah, all I remember really is like anytime he calls Ann and like Dan is there, he's just like, "Hi, Dan. Thank you, Dan."
So, like I said, that's pretty much our main cast. There's a couple more I took notes of, though. Scott Hayes plays the character is credited as Roland Treese. He's the head security guard for Carlton Drake. He looks like a young Bill Burr, and it was super distracting every time he's on my screen. This bald white dude looks like young Bill Burr.
Oh God, he does.
Can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And then Ron Cephas Jones plays Eddie Brock's boss. I literally couldn't find a name. He's uncredited in the movie. He's notable for playing Randall's dad in This Is Us. Great TV show.
Yes. Yeah, though I don't think you actually ever get a name for him.
He's got
Or no,
more
it
than one
says-
scene. He talks
yeah.
to Brock multiple times and then
I
fires
think
him.
I think maybe his first name is Jack. I think maybe Eddie calls him Jack at one point, but like, yeah, we're never given an idea of like who this is or even what the like network / company really is. I don't think. Like,
It's
I don't
funny
remember,
because Eddie Brock, he has the Eddie Brock report, and it seems like he shoots videos with a handheld camera and uploads them to YouTube. Like that's like the vibe you
Yeah.
get, but he clearly works for like a corporation that is capable of firing him, and they do. So it's a bit strange.
yeah.
You know what the Eddie Brock report reminds me of, Andrew? It reminds me of the Xander Zone. You know what the Xander Zone is?
No.
It's Vin Diesel in Triple X.
Oh God.
His extreme sports videos.
Yeah, a little bit.
Welcome to the Xander Zone. I don't know why I made him sound like a pro wrestler, but I can't do a Vin Diesel apparently.
I mean, that's basically what Vin Diesel is.
I can do a Vin Diesel. Ready? I am Groot. Huh?
Dynamite.
Yeah.
Dynamite. 10 out of 10. Yeah, but no, like you are right though. This is a very tight cast. We get a couple of like other name drops. Like there is a Jameson name drop for one of the astronauts on the ship, which is just a tie from the obviously the Spider-Man comics. Obviously, we've got a big thing that's going to happen in the sequel or be expanded upon more in the sequel is Woody Harrelson makes a mid-credits appearance as Cletus Cassidy. I don't know if he's actually called Cletus Cassidy, but he's credited in the credits as Cletus Cassidy.
Yeah.
And he makes the Carnage reference. And we know the sequel. The sequel is called Let There Be Carnage. So we know that's coming back. But like you said, otherwise, I mean, it's really Brock and Carlton. That's kind of your core cast. Like those are your main three characters. Everybody else is pretty minimal in the grand scheme of things.
It's funny about those references you're talking about ties to the greater Spider-Man world that may or may not be out there. We never see a Spider-Man in this movie.
Right.
At the time they're making this movie, it is a standalone movie.
Right.
However, after that, they reworked the contract with Disney and Spider-Man can appear in the future. Tom Holland's Spider-Man. This movie is technically the first and so far only movie released in the the cinematic universe. Say it with me. Sony Pictures
universe of Marvel
characters. Yeah, everybody.
Spumka.
Everybody. Rolls right off the tongue. So far, I mean, pretty successful universe, right?
I mean, yeah,
They got a big hit under their belt.
They do. Some odd choices in that one, but yes.
But we've got Morbius sitting on the shelf for over a year now. Who knows when that comes out? We know that Michael Keaton is in it, presumably as Vulture, which was in Spider-Man Homecoming with Tom Holland. Look, it's all very confusing right now. Nobody has the answers, but the idea, the visual of Tom Hardy fighting Tom Holland is very funny to me in a way that I don't even know why. Because like Tom Holland fighting Jake Gyllenhaal is about the same age gap, but that was
Right.
totally fine. I mean, Michael Keaton's way older than him, but I guess because Eddie Brock's supposed to be like a peer to Tom Holland. Talking about like the idea of Eddie Brock like bullying Tom Holland.
I was gonna say, like,
It's very
Tom
funny.
Hardy just looks like he'd eat Tom Holland for lunch. Like it's like genuinely that kind of thing. So I'm like, it is an odd thing to do. And I really don't. There's been a lot of people making suggestions. Like Morbius is a very odd movie. We'll see what's happening with that one. There's a lot of people that think Sony may just set up Venom as the de facto Spider-Man of this universe. Just have Tom Hardy be your lead in all of this, basically. There's other people that think they might bring back an old Spider-Man to be the Spider-Man in all of this, but like, who knows? But it's, yes, the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters is first off, like you said, rolls right off the tongue. But we'll see how it develops. I think they just announced a Craven movie too.
There's
off of-
so much in development there. I was
Yeah.
reading the TV shows. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, back to this movie though. Andrew, let's talk about some of the scenes in Venom, specifically the best scenes. And we're gonna start at the top. Right off the bat, I want to know what you think is the best scene of this movie. When is it firing on all cylinders for you?
I think it's the extended chase scene that culminates in Venom's essential unveiling. Basically, as I mentioned earlier, this movie takes a long time to get to Venom. Like as like in the suit on Tom Hardy, like it takes over an hour, I think, or right around an hour to get there. But there's a lot of like build to it. There's basically, we have the moment where Eddie gets the symbiote, and then there's a lot of like little things that happen. Like he starts hearing the voice, he starts doing small things. But then it culminates when the Life Foundation comes after him and he has an extended fight where Venom kind of finally starts taking control. And then this long extended chase scene that goes on for a very long time. But during this whole time, the symbiote is doing more and more things. And then it culminates where it looks like he might finally be cornered. And that's when Venom like appears and like envelops him in the suit. And we get kind of our first big look at Venom. And he's this
10-foot tall, hulking.
10-foot tall, hulking brick shithouse. Pardon my French. But yeah, it's just, it's over the top. It's ridiculous, but I think it mostly works. Hardy sells the weirdness of what's happening around him. You get a bunch of fun action set pieces that kind of culminate with Venom's unveiling, where you get the big first look at Venom. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you. That's best scene in the movie, in my opinion, as well. And it is a long chase. It is a very extended action sequence, but it's good. It's mostly practical. It's a nice SUVs chasing a motorcycle through that old action scene.
Yeah.
And it's very good. A lot of clever stuff happens. A lot of cool little beats. Like he has the symbiote this whole time, but like you said, it doesn't fully envelop him until the end. So until then, it's kind of just shooting out these goo strands every now and then. Actually reminds me a bit of Spawn in that way, because this starts in his apartment and the guys break in and the symbiote helps them fight, and eventually it jumps out of a window. But before he falls to his doom, the symbiote reaches out, grabs onto a balcony, and pulls him to safety. Very similar to Spawn having those chains react without him thinking about it and saving him. But during that chase, it does cool stuff like they're shooting, there's a drone after them, there's guns, there's missiles, and the symbiote pulls a car door off and uses it as a shield to deflect some of that stuff. That's just a super cool, creative, use of these powers. Of course, culminating, like I said, our first real look at Venom, and it looks like Venom. Obviously, what's still somewhat fresh in people's minds is Spider-Man 3, to the Topher Grace Venom, which was a pretty notable departure from our classic Venom look. He wasn't super large. Topher Grace's face was visible most times and not the traditional Venom face. But whenever he goes into Venom mode, he looks like Venom. He's got the giant mouth, the big tongue, the teeth,
eyes.
I wonder, like, whenever Venom rips, eats someone's head, for example, as he does at the end of the scene.
Yes.
Does Tom Hardy ingest that? Or is like the head quickly digested in dissolves into the goo that's around Tom Hardy. I'm watching the movie wrong. I
See,
realize,
Chris, you're
but I
watching the movie wrong.
can't help but one of these
No,
things.
I'm curious. It's interesting because like Tom Hardy, I think even says at one point, "Did I just bite that guy's head off?" Like he says it like he did it, and it's definitely odd. But like I said, when you see the first look at Venom here, despite the lack of spider symbol, I would say this more visibly appears as Venom, despite no Spider-Man
Yeah.
connection, than the Venom that was in the Spider-Man movie.
He definitely looks naked. He doesn't have that spider symbol, which obviously,
No.
it wouldn't make any sense for him
Yeah.
to have it. It's totally fine. I've no marks against the movie for that. But
Right.
you look at him and you're like, put some clothes on, dude. You look naked.
Yeah. Take Michelangelo's advice and put some shorts on.
Sick reference, Andrew.
You know my references are out of control.
For most of this movie, Tom Hardy looks like crap. I will edit myself here, but the movie does not. There's a scene where he's looking like crap. He's got the symbiote. It's having a toll. It's taking a toll on his body, and he goes into this convenience store. And I love this scene because the cashier says, "You look like," and he says, "Excuse me," and she says, "You look like." Usually in movies, like when the character's like, "What'd you say?" They're like, "Oh, I just said how you doing." They don't repeat it. She's just
She
like,
doubles down.
"Oh, you didn't hear me? I said you look like shit."
That was pretty good.
Yeah, one of the bigger laughs for me.
Mrs. Chen gets a few moments, and she's back for the sequel too. But
How is she?
But yeah,
really? I'm excited.
she is.
That.
There's a bit in the trailer where she shows up and Venom says something like Venom's talking to Eddie and he's like, "We could eat Mrs. Chen," and Eddie's like, "No, you're not going to eat Mrs. Chen," and she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Nothing," and he like walks out.
See, that's what movies.
That's what you expect.
What do you say? Yeah.
But yeah, she's got some good laughs in this. But yeah, there's a lot of that dialogue and banter between Eddie and Venom is really, really good. Like I said, I don't know if Tom Hardy like locked himself in a room and figured out the cadence and the different way to do the voices, but it shows. It comes off. It doesn't come off as a guy talking to himself. It doesn't come off as like Tom Hardy's just talking to Tom Hardy. Yeah. It feels like two different characters. And so these scenes all benefit from that.
I didn't know until like researching the movie that's also Tom Hardy's voice doing Venom. Yep. Like that could have, it doesn't sound like Tom Hardy. Obviously, he's putting on a voice. I'm sure they're putting some effects on afterwards, but all the more impressive that he's doing both performances.
Absolutely.
Well, Andrew, we mentioned this movie has its audience. It has its fans. It's pretty popular in the greater audience, including some of our listeners who are nice enough to write into the show and share their thoughts. So always remember, if there is a comic book movie that you like that was maybe not too well received critically or the internet hates it, let us know about it. Tell us why you like it. What are your favorite scenes? Who gives the best performance? bestoftherestpod at gmail.com. Write into us just like Mike from Louisiana. Here's what he had to say. I'm a huge Venom fan and was really excited for the standalone Venom movie in 2018 after his previous outing was less than stellar. As a whole, I really enjoyed Venom, though wasn't super thrilled with the real-world licensing Sony and Disney have to tiptoe around. Tom Hardy is an excellent Eddie Brock, in my opinion, and brings a lot to the role. He's a big guy who can fight, but is also awkward and comical. The action that they give Venom is great, especially the scene against the Riot Gear guys. Though the story suffers from a severe lack of Spider-Man. There's a typo.
Spider-Man.
I think it was written decently for what they had to work with. I'm still ultimately looking forward to the day when I can see a faithful version of Venom go head-to-head against our friendly neighborhood webhead. But until then, I'll be happy to see how Venom versus Carnage goes. Thanks, and stay positive. Hey, thank you, Mike. We will.
Yes.
Hashtag Positivity Podcast. We're not going anywhere. We're not changing. But it was very kind of you to write in. And let's look at this a little bit. The scene against the Riot Gear guys, that is another very cool action scene in the movie. Those are probably, the chase we talked about. And this scene, both fantastic. I think whenever you're going to a Venom movie, you're telling yourself, at the very least, I want some awesome action scenes of Venom going all out. And We get that. He's killing people,
Yep.
biting their heads off. He's being Venom. And yeah, that scene is, there's like smoke bombs everywhere. So he's
Yeah, like tear gas or something. But you
coming
get
out
that
of the
cool. Yeah, coming out of the smoke.
Yeah.
Kind of like a silhouetted thing at times. It just looks really cool. Like it's a very cool effect. And like you said, it kind of adds to the almost horror-esque nature of Venom at times, the monster side of it. That scene is also very, very cool. That's when Eddie is like giving the evidence of the Life Foundation's experiments to his boss. And as he's trying to get out, he gets cornered and he turns into Venom. And that segues us into the final leg of the film, basically. But good stuff.
You can also send us your positive takes over on Twitter. Hey, our DMs are open. Slide right in, just like Phil from Missouri, who says, I really like Venom's appearance. I don't mind the white veins instead of the symbol, and I feel like they nailed his face. Tom Hardy also does a perfect Venom voice. They were also super kind enough to add, this is the first time I've reached out to you guys. I came from the Min-Max crowd and have been listening since the Hulk episode. I've gone back and I'm working my way through other episodes for movies I've seen. Thanks, Phil. Thanks for listening. And so Min-Max it's another podcast. It's more than a podcast. It's a YouTube channel and Patreon all about games, friends, and getting better. I'm a big fan of their work, and they have actually advertised our show, done some ad reads for us a couple months ago. So I know a decent amount of our listener base comes from that community. So if you came from Min-Max, thank you. If you haven't reached out to us yet, go ahead, just like Phil did. Send us your thoughts on movies. We're going to read them. And go check out Min-Max. If you want video game news and further pop culture media, I highly recommend their content. It's very good. He says that he doesn't mind the veins instead of the symbol. I didn't even think about that. Those white veins as kind of like a replacement for the spider symbol, because the traditional Venom is solid black except for that white spider. But yeah, this one they give him like these white veins going across his muscles, and I guess that's why they did that, to kind of give him
it gives it a little bit of texture.
Obviously
just not solid black, just a little bit more going on there, so it makes sense. And then obviously, if you ever do have Venom interact with Spider-Man, it's easy enough for him to just rip off the spider symbol. It's not you can always go back if you want to, but it was a cool way to just give it, like I said, a little bit of a more unique look than just black.
And I agree with Phil's point. They nailed his face. That face looks like Venom. He's got the
Venom.
Super wide smile, the sharp teeth. But what more do you want?
Yeah.
What more do you want, people? So Eddie Brock's neighbor he pops into the movie a few times because he plays his guitar really loud. That dude can shred. Like the first time he goes over there to like knock on his door and say, "Can you keep it down?" Like, it's talented neighbor there.
Yeah, I like when there's a bit where like he opens the door after the apartment fight and he just like sees the carnage in the hallway and he's like, no. He just like slams the door. And it just reminds me of, there's a scene in Ghostbusters where the dog shows up at Rick Moranis' party and like bursts out into the hallway, and one of the neighbors just opens the door and looks and is like, oh, and slams the door. Just like, apparently I'm all about neighbors recognizing crazy behavior and just slamming their doors.
I'm going to stay out of it. There's a very poignant scene in the middle of this movie, or pretty early on in the movie, actually. It's after Eddie has like lost everything, right? He's lost his job. His fiance had left him. And the first time Dora approaches him, the scientist, about what the Life Foundation is doing, you were right about everything. He blows her off. He's like, I don't do that anymore. It cost me everything I cared about. And he has a scene where he goes to a bridge and he's overlooking the water, and the Life Foundation building is off in the distance. And he doesn't say anything. There's no dialogue here. He just kind of sits and contemplates. He fidgets with the ring that his fiance gave back to him. And he just decides internally that he's going to do the right thing. He can't turn his back on knowing what the Life Foundation is doing. Right. And he has the scientist card. He calls her up. He says, all right, tell me everything. And it's really well done. The movie gives it time to see that change internally in him. And it's kind of seeding that Eddie Brock is a good guy. Ultimately, Venom is somewhere between hero and villain. He's originally a villain, but he's so popular becomes an anti-hero, you could say. And this movie really rides that line. He's biting people's heads off, but again, Eddie Brock, it's seeding that he's a good dude, you could say. And
Yes.
that scene, for as crazy this movie can get, was almost understated, which was a nice change of
Yeah.
pace.
It's an interesting dichotomy too, because there is an arc for Venom in this film. Like, it actually gives Venom this narrative arc. You could probably, like I said, argue its effectiveness, but basically when Venom first attaches to Eddie, he's all about, bite people's heads off, give me what I want, do this, do that. And he's all about the greater symbiote mission, which is get more symbiotes to Earth so they can basically eat everybody. But over the course of being attached to Eddie and seeing Eddie interact with the world and getting more visions of the world, Venom realizes that, well, no, I shouldn't do that. And I should actually help you stop the symbiote that's trying to still do that, which is Riot, who ends up attaching to Carlton Drake. So that kind of gives us our big final fight. But we do get this arc for Venom where he's going from, I'm part of this mission to take over your planet, to, no, I'm actually going to help you. And I'm going to save the planet because maybe there is something good about this place as it is.
Yeah, and he likes Eddie. He's like, you've changed my mind. It's almost like a buddy cop thing, which is an interesting take.
It really is, and it's interesting. I actually just read this, but it's apparently Tom Hardy recorded his Venom lines at the beginning of each day, and then they were like played back to him while he was recording the scenes where he talks to it. So he was actually playing off his own dialogue, which, like I said, it adds to why it feels more natural than it otherwise would. But yeah, they get this, like I said, the first hour of this movie is played fairly straight. Like, we've got the Life Foundation experimenting with the symbiotes. We've got them like kidnapping homeless people to use as their experimental subjects. Like, you've got Eddie losing his job, but then like when Venom attaches to him and reveals himself, there is this tonal shift where we now get this like buddy cop banter between Eddie and Venom that in other circumstances may not have landed, but because Tom Hardy is putting everything he's got into it, it works, and it makes it memorable, and it makes the film better.
I kind of mentioned my synopsis that Venom wants to help Eddie Brock get back with his fiance. So they cross paths again, and the symbiote is inside Eddie. And of course, Eddie can hear him in his head that nobody else can hear him. He gets in the car with Anne, and Eddie's in the back seat, and Venom is telling him, he's like, you may not get another chance. Talk to her. And Eddie like apologizes for everything he's done. And Venom goes, oh, that's nice. And again, it's not like sarcastic or anything. Like, Venom is a straight shooter. He's like, oh, that's a nice moment.
At one point, Venom is straight, like they see Anne maybe for the first time, and he's like, ooh, I like her.
Yeah. Yeah. So Anne, we alluded to earlier, but she becomes Lady Venom for a moment. Eddie Brock and Venom get separated, so Venom kind of takes a ride on Anne to get back to Eddie. And we get a look at She-Venom. I did a little bit of research on She-Venom. I kind of looked in the character a little bit, and I saw that she's also been referenced as Bride of Venom, which is a much cooler name.
So all right, from this moment on in the cast, we'll call it Bride of Venom instead of She-Venom.
Ex-fiance of Venom, I guess.
Ex-fiance of.
But she arrives, and they have an interesting moment where they kiss. Like, she has the symbiote on, and they make out a little bit, and Venom slides on over.
Switches from one to the other. Yeah,
pretty cool. And Venom is sweet. He like leaves her behind. He's like, no, it's too dangerous. I don't want you to, Venom, the symbiote, cares for Anne. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So how comic book expert Andrew, how major is this character and with the symbiote in the comics?
It's not something that's happened a lot. It's kind of a similar thing where the symbiote is given to her temporarily a lot of times, sometimes to save her life because she gets hurt, or like Eddie gets separated from it briefly and it attaches back to her. It's never a long thing for the most part, but the things she does as She-Venom take a toll on her as a person. That's something that the comics dive into, which she has a little moment of where she's like, oh God, did I bite that guy's head off? But it's played mostly off pretty straightforwardly. But Yeah, the comic history is a little dark. I don't really think I want to go more into it.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. There's a line I wrote down here where just very casually they're talking about Venom's weaknesses, which one is sound and one is fire. And Anne says, sound is like his kryptonite. And it's not like a wink or anything, like, hey, we're referencing a DC character. It's just kryptonite, kind of like we talked about in the Superman episode. Like, Superman is so baked into our culture and, our vernacular that we can say something like that. And it's not even, it's like beyond, it transcends superhero references. We just know the word kryptonite means weakness.
Yeah, it's yeah, people, I guess, you ask the question then, is it that Superman exists as a fictional character in the world of Venom, or is Superman just out there? Yeah, but yeah, it's always funny to see that because that happens. I feel like there's a reference to Superman in one of the Spider-Man movies too. I think it is where Aunt May is like,
says,
you're not Superman. And I'm just like, is Superman here? Or like, where is he this whole implications? Time?
Let's talk about the character of Riot a little bit. This is the other symbiote we see in this movie. This is the bad symbiote, unlike Venom, who's bad but good symbiote. Yeah. But he wants to go back in outer space, get all the other guys, and bring the boys down to Earth and take over. That's kind of their plan. He basically the same powers as Venom, except we see him form like a lot more like stabbing weapons, and he's got this really cool scene where both of his arms turns into like giant axes, basically, and he just clears out an entire room in like one big swipe. It's pretty neat. But I know nothing about the comic book counterpart. Is this a pretty accurate representation of this character?
Not really. It's in the comics. There's a Venom story called Lethal Protector, which is part of what the basis for this movie is, where Venom ends up like spawning other symbiotes, and there's 5 of them, and it's Scream, Riot, Phage, Lasher, and Agony, I think. So Riot is like never portrayed as like the leader of these offspring, never really presented that way. So there is a tie here, obviously. We're kind of linking some of this stuff, but in this film, we're setting up Riot as kind of the leader of these symbiotes because there's 4 total throughout the film initially. We get Riot, who is the one that gets separated. So a running plot through the film is that Riot is jumping from person to person to person, I guess, to reunite with the symbiotes. We're not really given a whole lot to go off of there, but he ultimately finds his way to Carlton and finds out that they're essentially a perfect match to bond. So Riot ends up going to him. You get the 2 other symbiotes we see are like yellow and black and blue and black. That's probably like coded references to maybe Phage and Agony, because those are kind of the colors that they had. But otherwise, we're just kind of taking pieces here and there, kind of putting it together.
Streamlining it a bit.
The joke I kind of heard the first time is I'm like, if Venom is evil Spider-Man, Riot is more evil Spider-Man. Like it's that kind of thing where these are just other symbiotes in this movie. We're just kind of making one of them more of a direct foil to Venom. Because in this movie, Venom, like you said in your intro, Venom even says, I'm kind of a loser on my planet. Like he's not a big deal. Whereas Riot seems to be kind of a big deal. So that, makes it a little bit uneven, a bit of an uneven match at the end there. But yeah, I mean, like I said, they're taking pieces here and there, and I don't think any of it's out. I don't think anything's out of the ballpark. I mean, you're never going to get a movie where Venom has 5 offspring that all manifest. That's just probably not going to happen. So take what works, use it here.
That line though, that's what, when I saw this movie in theaters, that's what kind of like sold me on it. I was like, okay, there's something here. And even again, watching it now, like, yeah, Venom tells him, on my planet, I'm kind of a loser, like you, but we can be more. And again, just super earnest Venom. Like, I'm a loser, you're a loser, but look, together we can do it. We can kick some butt. It's just so, I don't know if genuine is the right word, but I love that characterization of Venom, and I love that tone, like putting lines like that in a movie. Now, that being said, let's talk a little bit about the split, the reception of this movie. Critically panned, I think 30% is safe to say, but audiences mostly eat it up. Certainly, people went to see it in the box office, and by and large, give it a at least a passing review. And I think the the inconsistent tone explains it all because the movie does bounce around a lot in tone. There's some scenes that are straight up like horror movie. Like you talked about Riot writing these different people to get back. I mean, the first person that he joins with, they come out of a car accident. They have a broken leg, like their shin bone is showing, and
Yeah.
they're like a zombie in Resident Evil as they're walking and then get healed. And then he jumps to another woman a bit older, and then we see her after traveling from Malaysia to America. She's had the symbiote for a while, and she's looking rough. She looks like give me vibes of like Edgar from Men in Black.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Edgar's skin is hanging off your bones. But
Is that better?
and then you've got the test subjects where they're trying to find like suitable hosts for these symbiotes, and those are like horror movie stuff. Like that first dude that gets the symbiote and like it bends all his joints the wrong way and he collapses to like that's some
body horror stuff. Yeah.
yeah, pretty gnarly stuff. And then you've got maybe 5 minutes later Tom Hardy like pulling a bag of frozen tater tots and shoving them in his mouth and eating like raw chicken on the trash can, and it's like more lighthearted, and it just bounces around a bit.
Right.
And I think
there's some tone issues. Yeah.
Yeah. So like as
you
a
could
critic,
say it that way, yeah.
You can't like look past like such a fundamental, I'm not gonna say flaw, but it's one of the fundamentals of filmmaking is to keep a consistent tone. I've mentioned this before. I'm gonna say it again. One of my favorite quotes about filmmaking comes from M. Night Shyamalan, who simply said that a director's job is to keep a consistent tone throughout the movie. And I love the idea of distilling a pretty complicated job down to such a specific thing. And, you look at this movie through that lens and there's issues there. And I think it's where the low critical reception comes from. Now jump over to the audience side. I saw this in theaters. I had a good time. Like, I'm not saying like, nominate Tom Hardy for an award. That's not what every movie's about, but it was fun. It was, no other summer blockbusters around the time. Comes out in October. I had a good time. It made me laugh. Hey, is this a good movie? Yeah. And I think that's what most people thought, hey, I want to see a Venom movie where Venom has cool action scenes. Done. I want to see a lighthearted comic book movie. Done. Like it checks some of those boxes. So this is the kind of movie that you'll hear people say things like, oh, you turn your brain off, or, don't go in expecting an award-winning movie. Like what the person is saying is like, yeah, it's kind of dumb, but it's fun. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's not. And I think generally what you're looking at with the audience is I don't think anybody will pretend that this movie is without its flaws. I think generally speaking, though, the people that enjoy it are just saying those don't hold it down for them.
Yeah.
Part of that, I think, is the Hardy chemistry. I think that works for people a lot, and I think it carries it, and it keeps people interested in seeing more from it. And I think that I think people, like you said, you don't want to say it as like, well, if you turn your brain off, but I think for people, they were just the positives outweighed the negatives to the point where they were like, I'm having a good time watching this. And I think a lot of people enjoyed seeing what felt like a far more, authentic attempt at Venom after Spider-Man 3. I think people were interested in seeing, Venom acts like Venom. He bites people's heads off. He does his things. He gets his moment where he poses on top of a building doing the not Spider-Man pose. Like, you got the iconography, you've got the look, you've got the style. I think people were just happy with what they got from Venom in this movie. And the big final fight really is just a giant symbiote versus symbiote CGI fest, but I mean, it was going to be that no matter what. So I think, the sequel's Carnage, so we're going to get it again. But,
and then to the director's credit, so one thing I noticed during that final fight is, like I said, is CG character versus CG character, and that's fine. How else are you going to do symbiotes, whatever? But it's a big slugfest, right? And it's on top of like this space shuttle that's about to take off. But the camera work is solid and realistic. One thing I said way back on the Green Lantern episode is sometimes when you go into like CG land, the camera gets crazy because you don't have to adhere to the laws of the real world, and the camera can zip around and stuff because everything is not really there. But doing that takes you out of the movie because it's just telling you what you're seeing is not real. That impossible camera moves take you right out of the movie. And this movie does not do that. And I was kind of wondering, like, they must have shot these plates, like just imagining things there. I'm sure they have some kind of previs, but the idea of them shooting like an empty scaffolding
Yeah.
where these characters are going to be fighting and then putting in later is pretty funny. But I appreciate that effort because it
Yeah.
sells it pretty well. It keeps it grounded as it can be for this fight between two super
Right.
beings at the end of the movie. At the end of that fight, of course, Riot is on the ship and Venom blows it up and presumably kills him because fire is one of the weaknesses. And Eddie says, "Have a nice life." Andrew, was that a pun? Is that like because he runs the Life Foundation? Is that what he was going for there?
I mean, I assumed yes. That's what I took from it. No, I agree, and I actually kind of like that action set piece. Just the idea of like having this fight like on a space shuttle. It's just a cool, I would have never thought to have the final fight of a Venom movie be on a space shuttle, but not just on the inside of it, on the outside of it. Like,
Yeah, even though technically the stakes are large, it's the entire world at stakes. It doesn't feel like it's shotgunning this character to saving the world. It still keeps it between a fight between two characters and keeps that scope in check, which I think is important for especially a first outing of a superhero.
And yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the camera movements too. And because you're dealing with these fantastic concepts, these otherworldly elements, but keeping that camera movement real, I think, like you said, it keeps the audience a bit more focused than when you're just like spiraling all over the place, dropping down and just, giving me a headache. Stop doing it. My head hurts enough as is.
Andrew, when you saw this in theaters, did you know Woody Harrelson was going to be in the post-credit scene?
I think
was it spoiled for you?
I want to say yes. I want to feel like I had heard somewhere that I don't even know if I'd have been spoiled, but like I feel like even if it hadn't been spoiled, I'd pieced it together that like that was what was going to happen. And I can't remember specifically. I think that was just the assumption, is that obviously Carnage has to be next.
But
and
Woody Harrelson.
Woody Harrelson, I can't say for sure. I feel like if I didn't see this opening night, then it probably started making the rounds and I would have gotten spoiled whether I liked it or not. But yeah,
I don't remember if I saw it opening or not, but I did not know Woody Harrelson was going to be in the movie. I didn't know there was going to be this Carnage tease. And it's a little on the nose. What does he say?
It's a little on the nose, yes.
There's going to be carnage.
Well, I think he says, when I get out, and I will, there's going to be carnage. And he's got this like wild, crazy red wig on, and it's like really out of the ordinary.
But it's a natural looking color. You got to appreciate that, Andrew. It's not Ben Affleck's Daredevil. It's kind of red.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to see Woody Harrelson though, and that's Tom Hardy is Venom and Woody Harrelson is Carnage. Man, imagine
what a world! Like what a time!
World.
What a time to be alive! Like that's just such an odd thing. That would have been like the George Clooney, Nick Cage, Batman, Superman movie of like '98. Just like what a strange time to be alive.
But then at the same time, imagine like in Woody Harrelson's been on forever. So imagine like in '96, people we know who Carnage is. I'm playing Maximum Carnage on my Super Nintendo. If someone told me that guy and Natural Born Killer is going to be Carnage, I would be like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It won't happen for 20 years, but yeah.
I don't think he's by any means a bad choice. And this was obviously coming after like kind of he had a mild resurgence there where like True Detective and stuff like that hit, and everyone was kind of like, oh yeah, Woody Harrelson's kind of great. So I feel like the sequel is definitely going to be a lot of Hardy and Harrelson just chewing the scenery, and I'm all about that.
Hashtag positivity podcast, but one slight negative I'm going to blame this movie for is past few days I've had Eminem song stuck in my head, which I like. I like Eminem. All the praise to him. Once in a generation talent, lots of great albums, lots of great songs, but I don't think anybody is saying that the Venom theme song is his high point in that.
No, probably not.
Venom hook is just playing on my head and not a fan.
But it's in your head, man.
Never know what hit him. Yeah, it's
just
not as
expand all of your M's. That's that you can just talk like that all the time.
Stan Lee has a fun cameo. The credits call him Dapper Dog Walker, which, sure, he's got a sweater on that makes him dapper, I guess, right?
Yes.
But he, at the very end of the movie, Eddie Brock was walking by. We just found out that Venom is still a part of him. And Stan Lee tells him to take care, both of you. He knows.
Because he's Stan Lee, even though he didn't create Venom.
Who cares? Always, especially now, this is always nice to see his cameos.
This was 18, so I mean he's nearing the end at this point, so it was always nice to see him.
So as much as I have a good time with this movie, it's still only the second best Venom movie of 2018.
I know where you're going with this.
Because that same year, Upgrade came out, and it is a very good movie with
not just a similar concept, but starring a similar actor.
Yes, it stars Logan Marshall Green, who is a good actor, kind of looks like Tom Hardy. And I can't take credit for this, but I saw the comment somewhere that Upgrade was Venom starring Tom Hardy, and I thought that was pretty good.
Pretty good.
But Upgrade, if you haven't seen it, it's about a guy whose body is taken over by another consciousness that improves his physical capabilities and can take over his body as will, and they got to learn to work together to take down a evil corporation. And it's very violent and fun. I like Upgrade a lot. It's just a quick aside here. It has a consistent tone, which kind of puts it above Venom in my eyes. But the director would later go on to do Invisible Man, which is a very good movie. So if you saw that one and you enjoyed it, but you haven't seen Upgrade, go back and watch Upgrade. It is a very good time.
Yes, I agree.
But I think that does it for Venom talk, Andrew. It's a good time. If you're listening to this, you probably know that already. If you've seen it, you probably know that already. But I don't think you need those qualifiers like turn your brain off or don't expect an award-winning movie. Just embrace it. It's a good time. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to like justify your opinion on the movie. Just say, yeah, I like Venom. If you enjoy the movie, embrace it. That's what I say.
I agree. I actually just look. Stan Lee dies like 6 weeks after this movie comes out.
Oh,
so this might have been the last one released. This might have been his last cameo released while he was alive. That's sad.
Yeah, Andrew.
But also kind of cool. But no, I agree with like getting back to the lighter tone. But yeah, I don't think you need to like quantify this. And I always kind of am a little hazy about that anyway. Like enjoy it or don't. I don't think you need to qualify your enjoyment of something. If you like it, you like it. That's all there is to it. And so with this, I think there is, if only for Hardy's performance, dual performance alone, that carries this film. I think there's plenty to sit down and enjoy here.
And visually, the redemption of Venom after Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, getting a genuine, authentic look at Venom, the face, the tongue, the size, the stature, all of that. I think people had a good time with it, and I think people are certainly interested in more.
Andrew, did you know that over 50% of our listeners use an iPhone?
I did not know that, Chris.
That means most people that hear our voice right now have an Apple account. You know what those people can do? They can, if they so choose, go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for our podcast. We would certainly appreciate it. And you know what? I'm going to ask you to go one step farther, to leave a review for every podcast you regularly listen to. It goes a long way in our visibility, helping people find our podcast. And you know what? We just like reading nice things about us, and we're going to read your review on an episode just like this one here that was left by Lincoln Park, Lincoln Parquet. It's either Lincoln Park as a butter substitute or it's Canadian Lincoln Park. I will leave it up to you, but Lincoln Parquet. They said, "This is my new favorite movie podcast. I love hearing these guys talk about bad, but trying to find some good superhero movies. Chris and Andrew are really fun to listen to and always sound very knowledgeable about the subject matter. It's great that they are giving these movies a second chance and have influenced me to give some of these movies a second or first look. Keep up the great work, guys." Appreciate those kind words, and we will certainly keep these episodes coming. And I always love hearing about people revisiting these movies or watching a movie that they otherwise would not have seen because they listened to an episode of our podcast.
I agree. And yes, Chris says thanks to you guys a lot. But I also want to make it very clear that I too appreciate all the kind words. Appreciate you guys taking the time. It's been a lot of fun doing this show and going back and revisiting these movies and trying to kind of change the way we look at things, the way, because it doesn't just have to apply to superheroes, man. It can apply to life, it can apply to every facet of your existence. But yeah, the words are very appreciated. We're glad to know that this is something that is catching on and people seems to be resonating. So we appreciate all your kind words, and we'll keep coming at you every week.
As we said earlier, this movie has a sequel coming out at some time. Originally, of course, we record these ahead of time, and we had this lined up to come out the same week that the sequel is coming out, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And we just received word that release date has been pushed back a few weeks. Of course, if you're listening to this, that's already been sorted out. But at the time of this recording, we don't know exactly when this is going to release. But suffice it to say, that sequel should be coming out soon. And if you go and see it, let us know your thoughts. Let us know what works about that movie. Send us an email, bestoftherestpod@gmail.com. Regardless of what the critical reception or audience reception of that movie is, if you go and see it, let us know you saw it. Send us your thoughts. We're going to work that into a future episode. I promise you that. And of course, remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check out their channel on YouTube or twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. We certainly appreciate it. It's the only way we're going to grow. And follow us on Twitter at BOTRcast. Thank you.
Tom Hardy is Eddie Brock.
I'm giving it the Tom Hardy, but I'm giving it the Tom Hardy as Venom.
Well, okay. Well, yes, I was giving it for his performance in the film, regardless of which way you want to look at it.
Well, I'm giving it for his performance as the symbiote. He was okay as Eddie. Okay, I'm gonna cut this joke, but I'm gonna cut that because it didn't come out very good.
No. Anyway.
Oh my gosh, that's him, right? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
His Jake Gyllenhaal's partner.
Yep.
Oh man, this guy's a really good actor. He who would have thought?
Who would have realized? No,
in my head, like those aren't the same person. That's incredible.
Right.
At any rate,
you saw Rogue One.
Andrew, you're making me look bad
too.
Here. I'm gonna cut the fact that I said I don't.
You make yourself look bad. You embarrass yourself.
So look, Riz Ahmed plays Carlton Drake. We all know this guy, well-known actor, lots of hits that you've seen. I'm gonna make myself look good in editing. You watch.